Hi everyone, it's Darlene. Welcome back for card number 4. It's my last card in the video series One Stamp, 4 Designs, 4 Mediums. Today I'm going to be using Prismacolor colored pencils. Here's the stamp set again, Spring Flowers by Simon Says Stamp. And here is the card that I'm going to be making on some crumb cake cardstock by Stampin' Up. Alright, so here's the stamp set again. I decided to focus on the leaves today because I haven't really used those. And then I'm going to use my Prismacolor 24 count set. I only have 24 colors and it's totally sufficient for me. So that's the set I'm going to be using. Now the first thing I'm going to do is take my crumb cake cardstock and I'm going to stamp it with some VersaFine sepia ink. So it's just kind of a dark brown ink. And I'm going to stamp this randomly along the side of my cardstock. And you'll see that I'm trying to rotate it and move it around so it doesn't look like I'm using the same stamp every time. And you can even untwist this so it's kind of tilted to the left. You can move it on your block and press down onto it so that you can have more of a straight look for a couple of these stamps. This VersaFine ink is a pigment ink, which means it kind of lays on the top of the paper. It doesn't dry very quickly, so that gives me some time to clear emboss it. All right, so you can see now I'm working with the smallest leaf stamp to fill in the holes. And notice that I'm connecting them to the first stamp that I use. So it may not look like it makes sense to connect them, but the person's eye is really not going to be looking at the details of how these leaves are stamped and connected. But you want it to look continuous, and that's why I just sort of stamp them so that they were touching each other. All right, now that I'm done with my stamping, I'm going to sprinkle it with some clear embossing powder, and you can see how it totally sticks. It totally covers up the brown ink, and then I'll heat it up to set it. The reason why I clear embossed is so that I would have a nice solid brown image, and when I colored with my colored pencils, it wouldn't fade out the stamp. Okay, now I'm moving on to my coloring. I have a white pencil, and you can see I'm coloring all the dotted leaves. This is just a solid coloring that I'm doing, and you don't want a very sharp tip. You want it to be soft so that you don't get any kind of grooves in your paper as you're coloring it. And you can see that I have to color around the embossed areas, but it's okay if you hit the embossed areas. It's not really going to do anything. So you could leave the card just like this. It's a really nice monochromatic sort of look, but I'm going to take it a step further with some green. So I have apple green. It's just a light green in my set, and there's nothing special about what I'm doing with this pencil either. I'm just coloring in the rest of it. So any of the non-dotted leaves get a full covering of this apple green. So here I am finishing it up. And then you can see I'm going to turn this around. It looks really pretty just as is, just like this. So you could leave it, or you could take it a step further like I'm going to do with this dark green pencil. I'm going to color over my apple green at the bottom and a little bit up the side, more on the left side of most of these leaves and some on the stem. So you definitely want to work with a pencil that's a little bit sharper because these areas are kind of small in between the solid and the dotted leaves, and plus the stem is pretty small as well. So I'm going to do just about half of these, and then I'm going to blend it, and you can compare having the dark green to not having the dark green. All right, so I think this is going to be the last one that I'm going to do. And what I need to do now, since you can really see a line between that dark green and the light green, I'm going to take the light green and I'm going to blend on top of it. And what I'm actually going to do is color on top of the line between the two colors to sort of get them meshing together. And then a little bit on top of the dark green to provide sort of a gradient toward the dark green. So now you can compare with the dark green and without the dark green. I love the way the dark green really adds some dimension to these leaves. So what I'm going to do is finish up the rest of my card with the dark green, and you can leave it just like this if you want to, but I'm going to take it another step further with my white pencil to add some light reflection. So I colored my dark areas in a shadow, and now I'm going to provide even more contrast by adding a little bit of white to the top portion of these leaves. Again, you want to use a dull tip so that you just get a kind of a nice blend without sharp lines of white. And I'm just not being too careful about where I place it. I just want a little bit of white at the tip of each one of these. And so I'm going to stop so you can see how it looks with and without the white. It doesn't make a huge difference, but I kind of like the added detail. So I'm going to continue on and finish this white on the rest of these leaves. And here is the final product. Now you could leave it like this and it looks really pretty, but I decided I wanted to add a little bit of a background. So I'm going to take my blue pencil. It's called Cerulean Blue, and I'm going to color a very solid edge here. So I'm going probably around 1/2 inch to 3/4 of an inch upward from the bottom of this side of the cardstock, and I'm going to press down pretty hard to get kind of a consistency of that green that I did on the leaves, so a really solid color. So I'm going to work my way all the way down to the bottom here, and this is going to provide the darkest area of my background. Next, I'm going to go back to the beginning, and I'm going to turn my pencil mostly perpendicular so you can see how flat and dull the top of this pencil is. And that's going to make sure that I don't see any lines of blue, so it looks like I just drew a bunch of lines. It's going to kind of blend it together with this solid area. So I'm using an extremely light hand, and I'm just going over the top of my cardstock and just pressing down a little harder as I get down toward the bottom, so that I get like a fade almost going from bottom to top. And so I'm just going to keep applying the same amount of pressure all the way to the bottom. And it's nice that I have these leaves in between, so it's not like people or the person who receives this is going to see the different parts that you've colored here. They're all going to blend together. Okay, so I went back and fixed a little bit of this area on the left. Then I'm going to go back in for one more layer on top of that second layer, and this is going to be an even lighter layer. So I'm barely touching the cardstock at this point. And so I really want it to be a fade from really, really dark at the bottom of this panel to really, really light. And so you can see I'm kind of once I hit some of those leaves, I'm stopping because I don't need to go beyond the leaves. I'm not trying to get all the way to the tip of the first leaf, like the one that's furthest to the top. I'm just trying to fill the area about another 1/2 inch, so that way at least I get 3 sort of different gradients from dark to light. So here's where we stand, and you could stop here, but I'm actually going to add one more little detail. It's a white gel pen, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to draw 3 little dots at the bottom of each one of these leaves. Now this is a brand new gel pen. If you notice that your gel pen, when you drop circles on a piece of cardstock and you're not getting a full circle, or you're getting a half circle, and you sort of write on a piece of paper and then you come back and you still aren't getting a half a circle, or maybe you're getting that double line a lot when you're trying to draw a single line with this Uniball Signo Gel broad pen, then that's an indication that you need a new pen. You may not have used all the ink in the pen, but it tends to dry up, and I find that probably about 6 months you need a new pen, no matter how often you've used it. All right, so I'm finally going to stop here, and I'm done with my coloring. I'm going to start working on the rest of the card. I have this Hugs die from Simon Says Stamps, so I just cut it out of some Neenah Solar White cardstock, and I'm going to hold onto it with my tweezers and put my 2A glue pen on the back and place it as far to the left as I can, closest to the leaves. And then I'm going to grab the words "Sending You" from the Simon Says Stamp set called Love. And I'm going to use my Misty since I spent a bunch of time coloring this and I don't want to mess anything up. So I'm going to stamp this sentiment with some VersaFine sepia ink, the same one I used on the leaves earlier. And so I'll stamp that right above the Hugs. And it turns out I didn't need to stamp it again. So that's good. Now I'm going to trim off the right, and that's why I put the Hugs as far to the left as I could so that I would have some space to cut off some of the crumb cake on the right. And so I'm going to put this onto my card base, and I'm also going to line it with a piece of Early Espresso cardstock by Stampin' Up. It's just a really dark brown. I cut this piece, and when I put it up, I decided it was just too thick and too dark. It just wasn't delicate enough for the look I was going for. So I cut an even thinner piece. I think that first one was probably about 1/8, and this is less than 1/8. So I put some 2A glue pen on the back, and I'm going to put it right up against that crumb cake. Now you could mat this to a full piece of the Early Espresso, but then you add a little bit of bulk to your card, and plus I don't like to waste paper. I'm really frugal about my paper. Okay, and that is the card for today. So I kept the rest of it pretty simple so that the focus would be on the leaves. I hope you enjoyed this video series, and I will see you next time. Thanks for watching.